Today I am celebrating the writer Jean Liedloff, who was a woman who went travelling in her early years and was able to experience how other communities brought up their children, the relationships between mothers and children from other parts of the world, and was able to communicate this message through her book, the Continuum Concept, which is a book with which I have a somewhat ambivalent relationship, because I believe it has in some ways created a lot of heartbreak for modern mothers, because it kind of creates a vision of what mothering young children can look like that is very difficult to attain in the modern world. Not impossible, but challenging. Because what she noticed was that in other more healthy societies where people seem to be generally much happier, children stay in physical contact with the mother for the first few years of their life. They stay in close physical contact with, not with some ornate baby carrier with lots of straps and buckles, but just with a simple piece of cloth, so that they can feel their mother's heartbeat. They are able to be in tune with all the electromagnetic vibrations that are emanating from their mother. They get to feel the calm, but also all the other emotions that mothers go through. And they don't use nappies. The mother and the child become in tune with each other because they can feel each other's movements. And I know a woman who applied the Continuum Concept. She never put her child in nappies. I believe they had like 1 or 2 accidents when very, very young at the outset of this, and quickly got in tune with each other. And I must say that boy, now that I've seen him grow up, seems to be so well adjusted. A massive testimony to that woman's mothering, and whether that all comes down to that early connection that was fostered through applying the Continuum Concept is difficult to tell. But the child sleeps with the mother, remains in close physical contact with the mother for many, many years, or at least until it decides of its own volition to go off into the world, returning back for more contact, but steadily separating of its own volition in its own time. It's so heartbreaking that this is just absolutely impossible to consider for so many modern women. The constraints and the demands of a working life. Sometimes mothers have only a few months before their child is deposited in daycare, where they're separated from their mother for 8 hours a day. I'm somewhat of a hippie, and you can probably tell. And we have tried in our families with our children to live as closely connected to our children as we can, and yet it's a way of mothering and a way of being a woman and a way of parenting which is so in conflict with the demands of the modern world that it's really hard to attain. It's really hard to maintain. I mean, maybe that just sounds like excuses. If I picture this woman who I consider a very great inspiration, I wonder how she would hear me saying that, as if I'm just trying to make excuses for not having been able to achieve that. I remember with our last 2 children reading this book, and it's so exhausting being a mother in this world, especially if you've already got other children. And when you have, most mothers today bring up their children without any support from sisters, from aunts, from mothers, grandmothers. There's no circle of sisters and friends that will just hold the baby for a while, or keep an eye, or make a cup of tea, or serve you some food, so that it's really hard to fulfill all of those daily obligations and still remain in close harmony and physical contact with your child as much as they need. So I feel somewhat conflicted in talking about this because it feels like it holds up an almost unattainable ideal, and yet I think it's a great thing that that book exists, because it's there to point to how insane our society has become. And I believe we'll be a lot more sane as a civilization when we make space for women to be able to pursue that continuum concept. So I'm celebrating the unique style and genius of Jean Liedloff.